All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to IPR Presents Cutting Edge Game Design Panel. With us this morning from Portland, Oregon is Wilson Zorn.
Hello.
From Pasadena, California is Mo Poplar. And from the Philippines is Pam Punzalan. I'm sorry, Pam, you're still in the Philippines at this point, right?
Yes, I'm still in the
Okay.
Philippines.
Um, so to start off with, I'd like for everyone to talk a little bit about their work and what they're doing at the moment and what they've done before. Let's go ahead and start with you, Pam.
Hi, I am currently, well, I mostly release small games these days, but I have a few large projects under my belt. Some people might recognize me from the House of Brookwood Kickstarter. I wrote a setting all about the Philippines there. I also wrote an adventure for Spire, Shadow Operations under Grant Howitt. My own personal projects, though, are a PTBA game called Sundo, where you play psychopomps who do not realize that they were once mortal and that they must win back their power in order to regain their memories. I also have a game called Asian Acceptance, which takes dread and extends the system to simulate the feelings, the complicated feelings that come with being Asian in the closet, and not exactly out to anybody, but a small support system. I have a Blades in the Dark supplement for Dagger Isles. It will be Southeast Asian inspired in the works. And I also have several other large projects, some of them OSR inspired, some of them FID, Forge in the Dark inspired, and some of them Mishmash. So that's me.
All right, thank you, Pam. Wilson, would you tell us a little about your work and what you're working on right now?
Yeah. The past published thing that probably, if anybody knows me for anything, is most likely the one is At the Hands of an Angry God. And since you often mention it, Jason, I'll go ahead and humble brag, or not humble brag at all, and brag. It's been nominated for Best Rules, which is very nice. And anyhow, it's about people establishing utopia, or what they think is utopia, and that's really up to the players. So how much do you look out for the principles of that lifestyle that you think you want to build, versus how much do you compromise that for the benefit of your own people, which is whatever your group is within that community, versus how much do you look out for your place in the end in that community. So and its survival and your role in it. And so that's been out for a little while. Super gratified, actually. I will make a comment on that. There's a Brazilian RPG designer, Rafael Vasquez, whose middle name I'm suddenly spacing. It's horrible because I realize in that culture I shouldn't do that. But Rafael Vasquez, who's I think in a Sunday event talking about a game he's doing, which somehow is related, and I've had some exchange with. So I do want to mention it to him because I think it might be interesting to people, and more generally. Anyhow, right now there's a game pending with Jason, Breakdown. To come out, which is about highly stressed people with a lot of baggage, including with each other, and how they deal with their intentions to do good versus the fact that life isn't that easy, simply put. And there's a couple different skins to it, not far away from what I think is one of the most important games of the last 10 years. I know we'll talk about it because I want to talk about it and you have it as a topic, which is Dream Askew, Dream Apart, which is an awesome game, by the way. Similar to that, it has two different skins for its own, which you'll all see, I hope, soon enough. And one that's a little more of the Orwellian near future or already here state, if you think that way. But another which is more, you're just a public servant trying to do your best in today's world. And of course, you can spin that as you like, as always. Next in the pipeline is Natural Selection, or tentative working title. I have no idea if that's cleared, the right wording. But anyhow, you're one of the great species who have manipulated humanity forever and are looking forward to the fruition of that for the survival of either the greater good of all, or maybe your own species, or perhaps to your own bond to another species or not. And I'll talk less about that because I feel like I should always talk about the one that's going to be out there. That's me and my work, I guess. There's always a million little things, but I'm just like a super slow designer, so like it's one thing every 5 years, really. So thanks.
All right, thank you, Wilson. Mo, you tell us a little about your work, current and past.
Um, my name is Mo. Thanks for having me, Jason. I just looking at print copies of my game Shibuya Nights, which is a Forged in the Dark game about kind of running adventures the way you would do it, similar to Blades in the Dark, except you're doing it for favors. And it's a little less murder, killy, whoring, raping, and a little more kind of anime fun and adventuring. And just a tone shift, a setting shift, and something that I could play with my little kid without getting locked up. I love the Forge in the Dark system. I'm currently working on a game called Arcade Busters, which is like a mix between Ghostbusters and Men in Black. I also have a Descendant from the Queen game, Bullet in a Blank, which is a great kind of almost party role-playing game where you play desperados who've come to the end of a dusty trail, and you're going to work out your differences at the barrel of a gun and have some macho therapy. It's real light, it's real fun, but it's very tactile and really not for this particular moment. So I'm looking forward to getting together with some people and playing more card-based RPGs.
Mo, do you want to talk about a little bit about your background as a Masonic Street Irregular? You had a great deal of influence on the Champions universe and the playtesting of dozens of Champions and Hero System books.
Yeah, I have a bad reputation as being a reformed D&D player, a nostalgic Champions gamer, and I was in the room when it happened, when DOJ, IPR purchased Champions, and just had a lot of love for the game, and am really happy to see that it's gone on to its latest version. I have a couple of characters in the video game, and I miss my calling as an accountant. Being an enthusiastic Hero System gamer.
You were in the room when I believe you and I had been gaming for a year when Ben Trafford said to Darren Watts, "If you'll stop complaining about the company, I will help you buy it."
He who shall not be named.
Yeah, well, it's real history. It happened.
It happened.
All right. Starting with you, Mo, have you seen any games lately that interest you? Anything you're finding really, really interesting going on in the world of cutting-edge role-playing game design?
I don't know if it's cutting edge. I feel like I have come back to the hobby about 4 years ago, and PBTA was a huge thing, and it definitely took me to get some time to get my head around it. And I really like how games are small, specific, and really narrative driven. Also, I'm really intrigued by kind of a lot of the world development games that are happening, like Microscope and Decima and Icarus, where the game is getting together and developing a world. I think that's really interesting. I've definitely joined a lot of campaigns where if you haven't read the volumes of material, you're gonna lose a role-playing game. And
speaking of our youth together, yes.
Right. Well, yeah. And so I like these ideas of collaborative world building, collaborative, just everybody bringing something to the table and kind of getting the game started. And, card-based games are really interesting to me because, my wife isn't interested in gaming at all, but she's intrigued by like the community building aspect of it. And, just this idea that games could be lighter and still have structure, but also be open to people who aren't historically, traditionally part of the RPG community. That's just really something that I'm excited about.
All right, thank you. Pam, what are you reading? What are you interested in? What do you find really fascinating that's going on at the moment?
Well, I'm one of those kids who came from a very varied background. I started in traditional gaming, D&D, then I went to World of Darkness, I did some L5R, etc., etc. But what I find the most interesting is less a particular game and more how there are so many spaces now and communities are a lot more open. I know that some people may think that this is a problem, but I don't think so. Now that there are more people empowered to make games, they bring in different perspectives, and this means a lot to me because I led a very interesting life. I started out as a teacher. I thought I was going to be an academic. I nearly have an MA in the bag. Then I went to real estate. Then I went to game design, and it's just been a lot. And all of those perspectives are things that helped me get there, and that's just me. In particular, of course, some people might recognize me as the girl who keeps shouting about RPGC, that is Role Playing Games Southeast Asia. A whole bunch of us just started going out there and posting all of these tiny things with very little, well, an almost playful irreverence towards the older ways of gaming. So people just threw their stuff out there, figured somebody must be listening. And also, it was a very personal exercise on our parts of reclaiming things and seeing ourselves in spaces that we were normally not welcome into or could not actually come to begin with due to many life constraints. Like I did say that I produced a lot of small games, and who would have thought that my game about writing trashy romance novels would actually sell? But that is one of my top sellers, where you come together, you have writing prompts, and you just want to produce the trashiest romance novel ever in just 30 minutes to an hour. That would have been unheard of. Most people would call them party games. So I really can't name a particular game. Admittedly, as a designer, I part of my design process is reading as much as possible. So I'm reading both new games and also very old ones that I never got around to. But the trend of spaces growing and spaces developing and us all developing the vocabulary to name new things, to interrogate old things, and also rebuild things is very important to me.
Oh, thank you, Pam. Wilson, what are you looking at these days that you find interesting and motivating?
Since I mentioned it earlier, I'll just complete the thought on it. Dream Askew, Dream Apart. What I really like about it, well, there's a lot of things to like about it, and I think it's one of the rare kind of, to me, great games, if you will. On the other hand, every game is a great game if it matters to you. So I mean, I don't mean it like a grand pronouncement, but I think that, to be honest, that it starts with saying, yeah, it's powered by the apocalypse, and I feel like that's almost, so it's a great acknowledgement, and I think the apocalypse has a lot of great things to it, but um, there's a lot of ways people have taken that I think have more limited maybe, and I'm not, that's nothing to do with anybody here. So I heard you all into those, and I think there's a lot of great stuff there. But I think that there's also, let's say, a narrative trap there, a bit of old school narrative lead that happens. And A Dream Askew, Dream Apart really breaks that completely up and really opens that to the group in the way that I think that is only hinted at earlier. And it's a great platform in its own right to write your own games. It's a great platform in its own right to explore character roles, and especially in terms of its abandonment of chance or fortune, which, I'm a big fan of. I love that. I love fortune. I love, the fortune in the middle and all that. But the reality is that there's also a fantastic power, especially with, invested players, of narrative fiat, and especially when you can pass that around. And Avery's done an amazing job with that in this game. It's an epochal work, in my opinion. Besides that, I'm pretty slow in catching up to games, and the one thing I'll also speak to, I think, just because I don't feel like it's, even though I know it's got an acknowledgement, I'm really huge on it, and it does something very particular. Oh, it does a few things that are fantastic. Is Caroline Hobbs's work, suddenly the name went out of my head. It's Downfall, which is an amazing game, and what it does is it really breaks character roles into their most meta. You've got, and forgive me, because I actually had the good fortune of playtesting it, which is rare, as I just don't often have the time. And it breaks those into a protagonist, antagonist, and a foil. And it skins those a bit differently in the final work, but it really powerfully does what Ron Edwards talks about, which is another great work in Champions Now, of distinguishing between the special effects and the core mechanics and how you're manifesting in the game. And I think what's so important about that is actually a point on inclusiveness. And I think a lot of games accidentally stomp on inclusiveness and your ability to invest in the game by feeling like you're limited in your choices or limited in how your character or your being can be you in that game, even acknowledging that it's not you at that same time. So yeah, those are some of the ones that frankly I wouldn't have into my head, but you did obviously send us an agenda, so that was awesome. Yeah.
Guys, I have a request from our moderator. She would like for you each to give out your Twitter handles so that people know them. If you would go ahead and start, Wilson.
Yeah, Zorn will, Zornwil. Hopefully that sounds right or makes sense. So Zorn is my last name. Wil is in the first name.
Pam?
That's the Dovetailer, so capital T for the, then Dovetailer, DOVETAILOR, so the Dovetailer on Twitter.
And Mo?
I keep it simple, Mo Poplar.
Okay, thank you guys. Moving on to our next question. Now, you all kind of touched on this, but feel free to expand and explore a little more, starting with Mo if you'd like. What trends in gaming interest you? So what's happening right now that's in its sort of infancy do you find interesting?
I'm not sure. I feel like the thing that has interested me most in the gaming community is just the welcoming nature that I found that I didn't see in the 80s and early 90s. I think it's awesome that, I showed up, at a con 3 years ago, and I was ready for a lot of the in-crowdy macho stuff that I used to see. And I just saw this wonderful kind of variety of people. I saw this awesome embrace and empowerment of the LGBT community. I saw lots of people of color from all over the world. Gaming just kind of suddenly seemed like it was more than just this fancy for Western Europe thing. Not just on the table, but also in the room. And I just find that it is a much more, I think community oriented and welcoming and supportive place than I remember it being. I was bored. So I was like, I could go for a good game, and I found way more than I bargained for. I also like how games are really leaning into mechanically kind of developing community spaces. I love rolling dice and killing, the bad guys. But just the idea that we can tell a story that may not involve any violence, that may send us all to some interesting emotional places. I think that's just really awesome. And frankly, I'm just trying to get my head around it because as a developer, there are stories that I think could be interesting to tell.
Thanks, Mo. Pam, do you have any thoughts on trends you'd like to share with us?
To build on what Mo said, that it means a lot to me in particular, because I would not be on this panel were it not for hundreds of unnamed people deciding to fund my efforts to go to Big Bad Con last year. So the biggest trend that I'm seeing right now is actually a trend towards kindness, compassion, and uplifting people. I still sense that there is a lot of hurt. There are still a lot of people who need to interrogate their biases, who they are, why they're here, the meaning of a game, and the meaning of fun. But I cannot stress this enough. I would not be here were it not for all of those efforts. And I have made it my business to give back. Prior to this, I still do a lot of community work for gamers. I do run a organization called Play Without Apology. I think a lot of people may know that the Philippines is conservative Catholic. It is not friendly towards women. It is not friendly towards the queer community at all. And the gaming spaces are extremely misogynistic and toxic. There's also a lot of patronage culture here that prevents many game designers from publishing their things. So to gain this overwhelming amount of support and to be told it's okay to ask and to go on a Discord server, go on Twitter and ask a question, tell your friends, hey, I need some help with some mechanics, or hey, I've got this idea. Can you help me out? And to be heard, not just once, not just twice, not just 10 times, but 20 times, 100 times, 1,000 times is amazing. It can get really weird, but also I kind of like the weirdness because that means that there is progress here. And frankly, I'm excited to see how it's going to be even next year or in the next 5 to 10 years, because this will change things immensely. And hopefully, more people like myself will be able to participate in more things like this.
Thank you, Pam.
Yeah.
That was very intense, actually. Thank you. Wilson, would you like to pick up with this thread?
Yeah, pardon if there's any echo because I'm normally writing the mute there. Yeah, I certainly can't, let's say in a, say anything like what you said, Pam. That was awesome, and I think that it illustrates things we don't even always appreciate. I take a historical perspective, so a lot of times I feel like I'm like, oh yeah, I can see the big sweep, but to hear you say it, and to reflect on it as well, and in my own life. I've seen that as well, and I think that's just, and it does have a consequence. It has consequence in our game designs. It really does. I mean, I think designs now, are, or at least think about these things way more than before. Way more. I mean, they used to not even think about them at all, right? So it's just it is a real trend and something that's important, actually important, maybe. Yeah, I think one other thing I would just mention is. Kind of switching gears a bit, but just kind of the thing I always think about in these trends. So I don't know about trends per se either. As you said, Mo, I don't know, stuff happens, and I think we don't know trends until a decade later and go, oh, those were the trends then. But one thing I think is happening, you see it a lot with RPGs, is this hybridization, and with card games. I think even if you don't see the cards present, you see the theme present. You could be drawing a card. That's what's really happening, and I definitely think that's a real thing. And not only in that realm, but like, for example, the next game I'm working on was inspired by me taking the time, which I rarely do, but I do make sure I try to do, of playing a board game. And it was just a really interesting Star Trek based game. Sadly, I don't quite remember the name of it. Somebody probably does, and maybe somebody can throw it in YouTube chat land. But it was neat because you explored that world through the different great alien races, and so you could be the Ferengi or the Klingon or whatever. And the interesting aspect of that, even though it was a board game and not something I'm probably going to play again, not because of anything with that, just my own time and what I'm interested in, is two things. It really taught mechanics through play of playing your character naturally, or your race naturally, whatever you call that entity, your civilization naturally. Mm-hmm. And it really, I realized how much you could abstract things you were doing, and which influenced what I ended up doing, natural selection. But also, last but not least on that, kind of a weird plug I'd make is, in terms of looking in places, and I thinking about how things come together, is there's a game show, a TV game show called Divided, which in which players have to both cooperate and compete to make money at the end. So you have to start out with 4 players. They're going to vote one off midway through, but they're answering questions all the way through, and the time ticks down, the dollars tick down. And it's a really interesting dynamic, partly because, at least in the person posting it, the first 2 seasons is a lot like a facilitator in a game. He's pointing out, well, this is what you thought, and interesting how that worked out, isn't it? And this is what you're saying. Well, oh, stop saying, okay, you're good there. And it's an interesting inspiration just in first of all, I like sociology. It's part of what I went to school for, but it's also an interesting inspiration in how people interoperate in that kind of a setting, because it's truly a pressure cooker of time. and different personalities come in every game, and how that happens. So that's, to me, I think those kinds of things we're starting to, and I think that's not just in games. I think across all the different sort of fiction realms and even academic realms, we're starting to look and realize that we have to tap into different veins. So.
Thank you, Wilson. We've got some comments and questions coming in, guys. Dave Mattingly wants you to know, Wilson, that he's happy to see you.
Great to hear his name. Great to hear you're there, Dave.
John Tabor would like for both you and Maurice to know that he's happy to see you. Good to see you. We have a question from Aaron Sturgill. Wilson, etc. all. Could you say more about how belonging outside belonging democratizes play, especially in comparison with Powered by the Apocalypse? Maybe, Wilson, you could lead off with that.
Yeah, but can you repeat that question again, just precisely? Because I feel like I should really listen to it.
Sorry. Aaron Sturgill says, Wilson, etc. all, could you say more about how belonging outside belonging democratizes play, especially in comparison with Powered by the Apocalypse?
Yeah, it's a great question. And in part, I'm impaired a little bit because I haven't, even though I've read belonging and in the terminology, I'm sure I'm going to be slightly off maybe, but anyhow, maybe to react as best I can, since it was thrown away first, but I'd love to hear, especially hear Mo's and Pam's thoughts, really. Because although I've done a lot of apocalypse-based play, I bet you all have done even more. I think that, I think it's interesting. To me, it's a fine line, and I think that at its best, and which I think Avery Alder's game does in a Powered by the Apocalypse game, is it draws the lines well, so that you start to appreciate where, not that you always know where you are, but that you have an engagement that is centric to that. Like, okay, I belong in this, and I'm outside of that, and I'm coming into it, and my agency is actually directly related to that, and how I engage my agency. Honestly, though, I think that if you take Apocalypse World and you just kind of bluntly apply it, you're in danger of doing the worst case of that, because I don't want to take away from the game itself. The Apocalypse World is a brilliantly designed game that works absolutely fantastically itself, and it's designed for one thing, which is a post-apocalypse setting where nothing is constant and nothing can be taken for granted, absolutely nothing ever. And as long as you're doing that, great, completely go whole cloth, I suppose. But there's, when you start to deviate from that, and you're not careful about that, I think that's why I think the question is so great, and I think it just deserves its own thought. Is that that by its nature, there's a lot of fiat in what happens in Apocalypse World base, and I think I'll shut up there because I think Mo and Pam have a million great things to say.
Okay, Pam, would you like to comment?
I think that belonging outside belonging democratizes games on two levels. Its design and the fact that it is easy to design for. So when you have it in your hands, you can come up with a million different possibilities. And the streamlined mechanics behind it also encourages literally any decision. It puts the power of creating the narrative, of creating the space, of creating each other in everyone's hands. So it is an impressive look at how you can bring a table together and give them the tools. And when you place it in the hands of another designer, it can sing, especially if that designer is very familiar with nuance and very deliberate with their wording, which is absolutely fascinating. I could geek out forever on it because of my literary background. I keep freaking out when I see a good game on belonging outside belonging stuff. And I think that when I said that it can democratize games two ways, because it's easy to design for, now you have, again, hundreds and potentially thousands of designers all coming from different perspectives, all with a different idea of community, all with a different idea of agency, of decisions, of gender, of race, of everything. And each one of them brings that into their work. So they continuously extend a new narrative. That said, I also believe that Powered by the Apocalypse has some fantastic design work in it. I think, to be honest, both games can be, and I'll be blunt, can be designed badly. That is a thing that happens with literally all games. So I prefer not to compare the two. I really think that it is a matter of what are you looking for? What kind of story are you trying to tell? What kind of mechanics do you want to use? And from there, you can decide, you can mix and match it, or you can go pure. So that's my take on it.
Thank you, Pam. Mo, do you have any thoughts?
Um, is belonging outside belonging a game or just the concept thereof?
Belonging Outside Belonging is a Powered by the Apocalypse variant
Got it.
that was designed by Avery Alder, who did The Quiet Year and Monster Hearts and other games too numerous to mention. That does not have it doesn't have any dice. It's all based on kind of investment with tokens. And there's it's laid out in a book called Dream Askew, Dream Apart, which has Dream Askew is a post-apocalyptic queer setting, and Dream Apart puts you in a sort of kind of magical alternate reality version of sort of pre-Holocaust Tsarist area kind of Jewish Poland.
Got it.
But I'm sorry, and I hate to interrupt, but I don't hate it so much. I'm not doing it, but I just think, Mo, your question is spot on, because I think there's a game, but there's also a concept there, and I'm not.
Right.
I myself am still like looking at that and trying to absorb it completely, to be honest. But
I'm not familiar with the game. I love the idea that what PBTA brings allows people to belong in the game. I've long said some of the most brilliant people I've ever met were D&D gamers who understood how to build a medieval castle in the 21st century, because they have gotten so far into it. And what I see with PBTA in general is just the ability to show up, I think often in a modern setting, which means anything is possible and nobody owns what the narrative can be. And, just the world developing questions. I think when you show up and you can just add something to the world, it democratizes the game in a way that the GM doesn't own everything. If you're a new player, you're bringing something new, and not being familiar with that game, I think that really opens the door to let people feel a certain ownership in the world. And I mean, if you wanted to play in a system that has like several tomes of policies, I mean, you could go to work and just earn money. You know what I mean? So I really think there are some inherent mechanics in PBTA that just make them a lot more welcoming to the new person to gaming, and it just makes people feel a little more welcome and engaged. I think the downside to that generally is sometimes these things can be a little one-shotty, because it's like, oh, we made up all this stuff last week. Do you guys remember the stuff we made up? It was something hand wavy about that. I'm not sure if these mechanics are cons in belonging outside belonging, but in PBTA, that tends to be the biggest challenge I have. If you wanted to run a campaign in Monster Hearts, if you wanted to run a campaign in Monster of the Week, leaning forward into the fun can take away from the story.
Mo, our next question is from Jason Pitt, and I think it's something you've given some considerable thought to. So let's lead off with you. What are your thoughts about the new trend of gaming using visual elements in game designs, such as found in For the Queen, Companion's Tale, or Fall of Magic? I know you've given For the Queen a great deal of thought.
And Fall of Magic. I hang out with a game development crew. A couple of people love Fall of Magic. I think it's just another way to get the fun going. I think it's another way to get people who aren't necessarily part of the gaming community to give them access in. A picture's worth 1,000 words. If you could show someone a picture and say, let's choose our queen, suddenly you're creating an environment where I'm coming to the table and it's not what I don't know. I can now have investment in what this game's going to be. And I feel like role playing was never really meant to be about winners and losers, but I think adding graphical elements to the game that may or may not have mechanical value, but definitely have emotional buy-in are super critical to people doing something worth doing more and more. I mean, why should I watch TV when I can engage with a YouTuber on what their next content's going to be? Like, I don't think we are as sit back, relax, and suck it all in a culture around the world as we used to be. And, some people don't watch YouTube. They just hang out online, where they can create narratives themselves. And I think kind of leaning into a graphical, card-based, tactile mechanic just really kind of updates things in a way that, again, knowing the specifics of a halberd or a broadsword, it's like, yeah.
All right. Thank you, Mo. Guys, we're getting so many questions now that I'm going to start to field them to you one at a time. Pam, from Julian K. Jarboe, do you think there are potential risks in very open-ended games of not providing enough structure to help players? How might it be empowering for the players to let them do less, if that makes any sense?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, from Julian K. Jarboe, for anyone, if you could field this one, Pam, do you think there are potential risks in very open-ended games of not providing enough structure to help the players? How might it be empowering for people to, and Julian does say let, with quotes, let them do less. So I think Julian's expressing some concerns about just how open-ended storytelling games are getting, and does perhaps more structure better? So a philosophical question.
Well, philosophically, at least my personal bias on that is there really are some players that are into extremely open-ended storytelling. So that is a thing. I know of a lot of people who want to go on forever and ever with their campaign, and that's fine. But I do understand that it can be very, very intimidating, especially I did see some discourse on Twitter recently where people were opening up about how they find it difficult when a designer simply writes, okay, you did the move, make a scene. And there's just no guidance. So I think that the onus falls upon maybe three. And okay, I'm talking in terms of a big publication, because when it comes to smaller games, we have to understand that many of these designers are on their own. So they have no editor. They're just churning it out. They're doing their thing. But if we're talking in terms of ideals, then that falls upon three people: the designer, their editor, and their consultant. Because sensitivity consultancy is a thing. You may be able to get somebody to give you input and say, this may come off wrong. This does not come off clear. This may be inherently harmful in terms of even the simple level of play. So you can put in structure for that, or you can give limits, but it really falls upon how you design your game. At least that's where I come from.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you. Wilson, from... Okay, this handle is difficult. Scarecrow Abel, Wilson. They have a question. I'm looking to adapt some anime that I love to a tabletop role-playing game setting. Any ideas or recommendations, especially for a group focused on D20 versus a group focused on WW? I'm not sure what WW means. Maybe you know Wilson, but I think somebody's
White
looking.
Wolf, I'm guessing.
White Wolf? Yeah, okay, White Wolf. Sorry. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, for D20 or White Wolf, sadly, no. That said, I have no idea. Well, it probably, if the group is open-minded, so first of all, I have very little experience in anime. So if somebody else does, please answer, and I'll just.
I do.
The only thing I can say, oh yeah, I'll kick it off to you. The only thing I'll say is the anime plug I always make, because I'm not big in anime, but I always thought it was such a fun game, is Made. But your group has to be like really open-minded and like really interested in playing around, which may not map well to that. So Pam, please, on that one.
Well, first off, as the very big Japanese anime fangirl, what anime do you mean? That is one thing, because anime, if you take it by its definition, is an animation style. It is not it, and even their aesthetics wildly vary. So perhaps if the question is anime inspired, are you talking about particular themes? For example, are you going to go for shonen, which is the boys anime? Are you going to do something like Full Metal Alchemist? Are you going to do something like My Hero Academia? Or do you want to go Sailor Moon? Or do you want to go Cardcaptor Sakura? They are all different. So if it's anime inspired, the first question you should be asking is, what do you mean? And where will your limits be? And I would like to caution people, especially, and this is coming from the Filipino girl in the room, those anime themes and aesthetics do have a cultural context to them. And at the end of the day, anime is written for a Japanese audience, and we happen to be on the outside looking in. So I would strongly advise having some sensitivity consultancy in there and trying to figure out what kind of story you really want to tell. There are a lot of narratives out there. They don't necessarily have to be from Japanese anime. But if you have one particular thing that inspired you, go for it. Just be careful.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you very much. Maurice, from Kyle Elzy, what are some of the best examples of original game mechanics that match perfectly with a theme or setting?
So I feel like this might be a good question for me because I've gotten into a couple of different game systems. I really like how in the Stress Works in the new Alien game that I played a couple times. I really haven't had a lot of time to think about it, but just as a player, it is really creates an intense environment. I love how dice pools work in Forged in the Dark, Blades in the Dark games. Just there's a level of dice pools and Devil's Bargain, where you're going to accept a consequence to have a greater opportunity, but it's still kind of all or nothing. I absolutely love the complicated success mechanic, which gives you what you want, but allows the GM to kind of narrate consequences in a way that isn't just yay, you win. I think there's a lot of great mechanics out there. I have really gotten into Blades in the Dark. I mean, Forged in the Dark and PBTA and a couple of other games. I think some of my fellow panelists might have a broader experience with this.
Pam, do you have any thoughts on this question?
Well, if Blades in the Dark was definitely one of the things that was top of mind for me. Everything that Mo said about the consequences and the Devil's Bargain is just chef's kiss for me. There was a game that I read recently, Iron Sworn. I think it was released in 2018. That is a fascinating game because it is a toolkit. And the entire thing is about you are warriors who swore iron vows, and everything in the game, from the categorization of the moves to the questions that they ask you to the lies and truths that they present to how they determine their randomness, is all about you being those warriors in fragmented communities, going out there, fulfilling your vows or failing to do so. And I think it might be interesting in particular for Mo and Wilson if the two of you are not familiar with it, because it takes PTBA and it categorizes all of the move sets, and each move becomes a mini subsystem that is just fascinating to read. And it is completely free. So again, it democratizes design. You can take it, you can build on it, you can do your credits and everything. It's just, I could fangirl forever on it. Another game that I really liked, and it's cool that Mo mentioned Alien, Mothership. Mothership is a great game for stressing yourselves out because it is all about space horror and everything from the roll under system where you have to fight against percentages, to the way that damage is done, to the way that you take stress conditions, to the way that you gain XP, is just, it makes for a harrowing and wonderful experience as a gamer. So I think those are the two top of mind for me.
You're muted, Jason.
Jason.
Sorry, guys. Sorry. Thank you, Pam. Wilson, do you have any thoughts on examples of game mechanics that match perfectly with theme and setting? And also, I have another question I want to run past you from Justin Ford. Could our designers talk about the unique joy of designing powered by the apocalypse style moves? Wilson, could you take that away?
Okay, well, I'll start with the first one you said, and then come to the other one, and probably dish it fairly quickly from there. I've done some powered by Apocalypse, but it's more home fun than published. So anyhow, to the first question, yeah, I mean, one of my favorites, and it's very much echoed in the game I talked about earlier, that the rock that Jason's company will be doing is Don't Rest Your Head, in which there's this dynamic of the exhaustion state you're in, as well as this sort of madness state, that sort of dreaminess, and the ability you have to manifest yourself in a dream world. And without going into too much detail, just in brief, because I think time-wise it just makes sense to say, I think if you look at that and how it works in that world and how it works in the setting and how it works in what the game's trying to do is just a beautiful example. And one of the things I really like about it is that whole notion of tapping into something and the escalating sense of, you get more and more power, but you also become more and more so embedded so deeply into it that you're really losing yourself and who you are. And it's not that you're no longer who you are, you're just this very distinct, very too purified version, you might say. And I think it's just an amazing thing. Ken Hite, I think, called it something like the best Cthulhu death spiral kind of thing you can experience, even though the game wasn't built for that specifically. So I think that's a great example. Dogs in the Vineyard, I would say, is a master class. Just read it cover to cover, and every mechanic is just beautiful. Nothing's there that doesn't need to be. Everything's there it needs to be. So that's that on that. On Powered by the Apocalypse. Sorry, can you repeat the precise question on the inspiration and joy part? Because I do want to answer it properly.
Yeah, absolutely, Wilson. Could our designers talk about the unique joy of designing Powered by the Apocalypse style moves?
Oh, yeah. Actually, I actually do have a little bit to say on it, actually. And I do want to dish it fairly quickly then, because I think you've both done so much more. But one of the things I really liked about it, and it's interesting to hear, Pam, what you talked about, because it taps into it, is, there's this underlying mechanics of how those moves work. And so I did this game, which was based on a comic book called Disavowed, which I doubt many people know, but it's basically these supernatural or metaphysical agents of the government who are, second, third hand, and they can be disavowed any moment. They're nobodies. And I married that to a Hellboy world, because that obviously fit, and put it in the 1950s, because why not? And one of the really fun things was taking those moves and figuring out, there's a richness to the way Powered by Apocalypse does it, which frankly I'm not even as deep in as I'm sure you both are. So that's why I don't want to go too much further. But the fun thing, one of the most fun things I think was that with the agency the players had, this is the strangest aspect, but the power of moves and the ability they had with agency to do things was, even though I brought no sex moves over because my group was very traditional and they weren't going to do sex moves, wasn't going to happen. Strangely enough, because of the weirdness aspect of the game and the otherworldliness aspect, these human or half-human characters suddenly had the two out of the three had these sexual, vibrant relationships with alien entities, literally. And a lot of that came through the fact that they could manifest what they were doing because those moves are tuned towards, what happens with compromise, what happens with superiority, what happens when I fail, and framing that in very particular. And what I did was I didn't have it by character roles. I just did it by, here's a catalog of moves. And here's the moves that just any human could do. And here's the really weird ass stuff. And you can get 2 of these and 1 of those, or just take 2 of those and nothing else, or something like that. I remember it was years ago. So it was a lot of fun. And the inspiration was really, the fact those moves force interplays of where your agency is. But again, Pam and Mo, I bet have way interesting things to say as well.
Yeah, Pam, if you'd like to riff off that, the joy of designing style moves.
Where do I begin? As a designer, you have to marry, or at least it's interesting how you marry the different scenarios by which your players can go to, and what kind of message you want to communicate, and how do you want them to take failure, because the idea is to fail forward, and that the failure must be interesting, because traditional games traditionally are you fail, you dead, or you fail, it hurts. But Powered by the Apocalypse, when it is designed, I guess, well, or ideally, the failure is supposed to bring in new elements and new complications and new entanglements. And moves can also be a great excuse to just go ham on the flavor. When I mentioned Sundo earlier, you are playing Psychopomps and you actually have a Memento Mori, which is your weapon. And I literally made a move where, like with most anime, you can bring out a fancy sword and fight angels with it. And that is the entire move, you manifesting that weapon and manifesting your will and the thoughts that run through your head when that happens, and the memories that may come to you that you have no name for. And there is a game that I'm working on with my partner called Navathem's End, and it is about the choices and consequences of heroes that came 600 years before, prevented an apocalypse, but there were consequences upon the world now, and you are picking that up. And one of the moves that we created is called Make the Hero's Choice, where you decide what would your hero do? What did the Core 7 think of when they were in this moment? Is there anything in the past that can give us something in the present? So I could just, again, go on forever about how fun it is to just kind of go, what am I telling here? What story do I want my players to tell? And how can I open myself as a designer to letting them tell their stories without me interfering? So.
Thank you, Pam. Mo, the joy of Powered by the Apocalypse moves.
I may blaspheme here. I love what Powered by the Apocalypse does with its moves and the resulting actions that can happen. I love how they have consequences that come directly out of it. Just as an elegance factor, if I show up at the table needing character sheets and move sheets for every player, I have definitely been thinking about trying to move away from that and maybe have flavored moves that tell you what they do on the character sheet in a game that is specific enough that it does a thing. It may not be the game that you use to go climb mountains with, but it is the game you use to fight dragons with. So I really like PBTA moves. I have made some myself, and it's a really intense exercise. And I think it really reaps rewards on the game table as far as flavor. But I gotta say, Blades in the Dark lets you do a couple things. And this is what you do in this game. You're either gonna sneak or you're going to, I think one of the original moves was murder somebody. And it's that's what you do in this game. And it just has this level of elegance that I feel like it's interesting to write a game book and then realize you rarely see game books at the table for games that are written well, so that's my designer thought on PBTA moves.
Mo, rolling on with that, another question from the Bay Area's own John Tabor. What is an example of a well-designed Powered by the Apocalypse game, and why? Well, you just wrote one, so maybe you'd like to comment on that.
Well, my game is Forged in the Dark, which feels very PBTA. I think the biggest elements are just leaning into a particular kind of fiction and giving people a very clear sense of like, what are we here to do? I hope everybody knows about Shibuya Nights soon, but a lot of people have played Monster of the Week, and Monster of the Week is a thing. You know, you show up. What are we gonna do? We're gonna go get the Monster of the Week. It has a very great name. The classes are set up so that you can go out and you can play several TV shows. You could play Buffy, you could play X-Files, you could play Men in Black, and it just really leans into this point of fiction. I think where PBTA works better for me is when you have elements where character progression help you get to the next level, that encourage you to want to play that character again and really give you a sense of ownership. I played some PBTA games that, you drive characters like you stole them. And there's definitely a sense of, well, this doesn't matter because I'm not playing this character again. And for me, I think character progression and the promise of what's ahead really helps to make a PBTA Forged in the Dark game something that like has you coming back. In a lot of Forged in the Dark games, it's the ship or the gang or the army that really kind of have you coming back saying, but I want to nurture and develop this thing. So those are my thoughts. I think, PBTA is a great game to, pick up and have a good time tonight too. So.
Thanks, Mo. Guys, anybody object to running a little late? We have some really excellent questions still coming in.
I'm okay.
Happy to go.
Okay.
I'm fine.
Then I have a great question for all of you. We'll start with Pam from Rachel Ting. Question for all the panelists. What would you say is something that you always strive to include in all of the games you design? Any themes or principles?
For me, hi Rachel. that's my IRL friend. For me, safety and consent, that is a line that people should never cross with me. If I see a game that does not even have a paragraph about the importance of consent and agency for your players, I tend to take a step back before I read through it, because I'm a woman, I'm queer, and I'm not welcome in many spaces. So in my design, you must have safety and consent tools, or you must acknowledge that your players, your GM also are people, and that you need to be wary of how this simulated experience can bleed into your real life and vice versa. There are lines there that should not be crossed. There are things that should be obfuscated, and it is absolutely okay, because fun is different for everyone, and fun can be political. And that is also my second point, the recognition that fun is political. We've moved well past the point where we can say it's just a game. For some of us, it is not just a game. And there are certain themes and certain stories that are not actually for some people to tell. And I like emphasizing that a lot in my own design, where this is my story, this is me reclaiming something, and this is something that matters to me in my own. And if you cannot respect me as a person in real life, or me and my wonderful partner who's in the background, that's a line that I will not allow to be crossed for me. So it's the recognition that fun is political, and safety and consent tools. And I will walk away from people who don't respect that.
Okay, thank you, Pam. Wilson, do you want to elaborate on this?
Yeah, I certainly don't believe I've taken the intensity and the proper intensity that Pam and some others have taken in that same regard that you just talked about. But it is something I do think about in every game that I seriously putting out there, and so I echo it a bit, and I won't say too much more other than, I think I could always do more, but that's something to always bow towards, is the social responsibility the group has to each other. I tend to put it more that way, I guess I'd say, but that you really have to respect each other. I try to make that brief because then somehow it's a fundamental human thing you hope people would do, but at the same time, I think it needs to be said somehow. Beyond that, and so design elements in every game, I think that's a bit of a tough question, because I try to, look at games as what they are in an individual context. But I do think obviously being clear on agency, being clear on examples, I think that's a huge thing. And Pam, you raised a really great point. When people are doing a small game or an 8-page game or something, obviously that's a trade-off that just has to be there. And there's so many brilliant games, and people like Jackson Tegu and others who have done these awesome games. That they're so brief that you can't really have everything there that you might want. But for a full published game, I think examples are key, not just because they help explain, but because they also get a bit of permission. What can I do with this? Is what's okay to do with this? What is it? And not just okay in the sense you should or shouldn't, but where does this shine? What's the purpose of me playing this? And that's the other point. I think somewhere you need to tell people what the purpose of playing is, however you do that. Whether you do that very explicitly or you do it by embedding in those moments and mechanics and examples exactly what you're getting at, however you do it, to me, that's a fundamental. Finally, having thought about it from maybe a different angle, but to answer the question most fully, I thought about, why do I make the games I make that I care about, the ones I really spend time on? And so far in my life, it's been apparently a search for why people who believe they're good do bad things. And I think that's a theme running in my games that is just there, both from my own life and it is amusing that I care about. So for me, that's somehow in there, even though it's not like I set out in each of those games to do it, but it's certainly an implicit bias that is right there begging, I think, everybody to participate in that question, which isn't always comfortable, although I do try to make them a bit general, which is, I guess, the last point. I try to be a little bit, like Pam says, not every game's for everyone. And I think you have to qualify up front, is this for you or not? But once you're past that, hey, it's kind of a broad you there. So it's my thoughts on it.
Thank you, Wilson. Ron Edwards once told me that he thought the very best kind of villain was somebody that would be a hero, except that they'd gone way too far. So I hear what you're saying. Mo, would you like to comment on this? But also I have another question for you, following up from Kyle LZ. Content or gameplay wise, what do you feel is missing or yet to be explored in RPG design?
I just want to and everything Pam and Wilson said. I absolutely think guardrails I call them guardrails. I have this cynical sense that people are going to buy your game and they may read your game and they're going to play your game, and you can hope for the best. Once your art's in the world, I think that's the best we can do. I think the X card is a great, just reminder for everybody that, look, don't be a butthead. I don't know, the D&D comes with an X card. So there's almost two different kinds of games, There's these new games where I'm supposed to, be nice to people too. And there's the other games where we can do it the old way. And I don't know, I don't want to rag on D&D. It's really fun. It's a great system. I love the depth of lore. But the old way it used to happen was a particular thing. One more time with your question, Jason.
Yeah, no problem, Mo. It's do you have, oh, wait a minute, sorry. There's been a lot of questions. Content or gameplay wise, what do you feel is missing or yet to be explored in RPG game design?
This is interesting for me because one of the things that I'm working on is a game where you can have fun in a Cthulhu-ish kind of way, playing as a African American. And I think a lot's been done in this space. Harlem Unbound, I thought, was a really interesting approach to this. And I think just really allowing people to, be welcome, to show up and express themselves outside of their own personhood. I think if you decide you're going to play a thief, you're still kind of being yourself, but approaching like a different, almost VR self in a way that is accessible, that has enough scaffolding so that people aren't afraid they're going to do it wrong, that still engages the levels of fun so that this isn't just a after school special classroom thing, but at the same time allows you to be immersively engaged in seeing life from a different perspective. I think just has some really powerful impact. And it seems like there's a lot of that in RPGs already. You know, I can be a zombie hunter and I can pretend that I'm desperate enough to hunt zombies. But some people have a hard time being, you know, a transsexual one. You know, they draw the line and say, I don't know anything about that, so I'm not going to do it. And I'm just interested in kind of the role play experience that allows you to get even deeper and still have fun.
Thanks, Mo. I think we'll go to a last question if that's okay with all you guys, because I know Mo, you've got places to go and things to do, correct? Okay.
Stuff to fix.
Yeah. Let's put this one out to Pam. This is from John Irwin. Do you have any design work that you've invested time on but didn't release? What turned you into this decision? I think John meant what made you make this decision.
Hi, Erwin. That's also a friend of mine. Guys, great to see I'm supported here. Love you. What design work have I not released yet? I've mentioned this on Twitter. It is a work called Waking the Dead. I am agonizing over every step of it because it has gone through 5 different iterations since it was once a campaign under World of Darkness in 2012. So technically speaking, this game has been in development for 8 years. Now, I was actually going to make it a Forged in the Dark game, a pure Forged game. Then I changed my mind. I got a little lost, and I also decided to go and make a new system. Now, I say that with a caveat. I don't actually believe that anything in game design is new. It is simply things that we have not seen ourselves, and it is other things that have not been articulated well enough for most of the majority of the audience to understand that this is a tabletop game. So I am currently stuck with its development mostly because of pandemic stuff. It takes a lot of time to put together a large game. And I guess that would really be the only project I have where I have it, it's in my head, but I am feeling at present a gap in my skills as a designer on how to make its vision come true. I have some really good ideas. Some people have told me just put it out there, but I'm like, I cannot be satisfied with it yet. I know it'll come eventually, maybe when I'm 40, but we'll see. So right now it's on the back burner because I feel like I need to read more, and I feel like I need to play more, and I feel like I need to understand what that game is really going to be about now, because it was a very different creature in 2012.
All right, thank you, Pam. Guys, I think we'll wrap up now. This has been fantastic and a real pleasure. I want to thank you all for coming and joining here today. And hopefully we can do this again at a future convention.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, great to talk to you.
Everybody have a great day and take care. Thank you.
Yeah, y'all too. Take care.
Thank you.